Over the 40 years of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles history, many iconic stories have been adapted across various versions of the franchise. One such story was Return to New York, a 1989 comic book trilogy that set the Turtles' status quo once and for all. In the Mirage universe, this trilogy unfolded 3 years after the Turtles had embarked on adventures against foes like the Shredder, Baxter Stockman, and Savanti Romero. They had discovered their origins following a space adventure where they battled the Triceraton Republic, traveled through time, and continued their conflicts with the Foot Clan. However, the clan was stronger than they'd anticipated, and one day they were shocked to find that the Shredder had returned. This revelation cost April her home, and along with the Turtles and Casey Jones, they were forced to seek refuge at a farmhouse in Northampton. The Turtles spent a whole year there, healing from their recent battles and planning their eventual return to the city to definitively end the Shredder's reign. You probably know these story beats, but in the context of 1989, it meant that the comics were in a way different reality compared to the cartoon, the Archie comics, and the toys. There were several reasons for the Turtles' stay in Northampton. Firstly, the comic book creators lived there, which made it natural for them to set stories in familiar locales. However, the primary reason for their prolonged stay was that the Turtles' creators, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, were too overwhelmed with managing the business side of Mirage Studios to sit down and craft new comics. Consequently, they invited other artists and writers to continue the Turtles' tales in their absence. The timing was crucial. The 1990 movie was also going to explore the Northampton story, so it would have made sense for the Turtles to be back in the city by the time of the movie's release. Putting an end to that saga would mean more freedom for other guest artists to come in and tell a Turtle story. Yet, before moving on, the creators needed to resolve a significant plot point: the resurrection of the Shredder. The duo killed the character in the first issue of the volume because they didn't think there would be a second issue. But as the book became increasingly popular, they couldn't resist the temptation of bringing him back. Thanks to an article that Peter read, they found a way to explain his return without undermining his death in TMNT number 1. I'll explore the science behind it later in this video. Kevin and Peter wrote the story, with covers penciled by Kevin, inked by Peter, and colored by Steve Levine, who also lettered all the issues. As for the interiors, Kevin did layouts for Book 1 and inked Book 3. Peter did layouts for Book 2 and inked Book 1. Both of them did the layouts for Book 3. The 3 issues were penciled by Jim Lawson, and the second book was inked by Eric Talbot. This storyline was later expanded in 2010 in the last official issue of Tales of the TMNT Volume 2. The story would fill in the gaps between Books 1 and 2 with a plot by Eric Talbot and Jim Lawson, pencils by Jim, inks, tones, and letters by Eric, a frontispiece by Michael Dooney, and a cover by Jim, Eric, and Steve. This saga began at the farmhouse where Raphael, weary of hiding, decided it was time to return to the city. Leonardo tried to persuade him to stay, but overwhelmed by pent-up rage, Raphael defeated Leonardo in battle, then snuck onto a train back to New York. Knowing Raphael was walking into almost certain death, his brothers decided to follow him back to the city before it was too late. Raph stayed in the sewers until he encountered the Foot Clan again. Being in his domain, Raphael was able to defeat the ninjas, but then he would have found himself face to face against Zog, one of the Triceratons that was caught by the transmat beam when the Utrom brought the Turtles back home from the Triceraton homeworld. Unfortunately, Earth's atmosphere was inhospitable for Zog, gradually deteriorating his brain, a detail I've covered in my original Triceratons video. After a quick fight, Zog knocked down Raphael, captured him, and brought him to his hideout, where the decayed corpse of his commander lay, a commander Zog believed was still alive and commanding. Trapped there with Raph was a foot ninja, who convinced him to free him so he could save them. Unfortunately, the ninja then tried to stab him. A quick fight took place and the ninja died, impaled by Raphael. Out of options, Raphael assumed the identity of Zog's commander, convincing Zog that his commander could morph into other beings. He then instructed Zog to address him as Zoraf. Zog survived all this time eating foot ninjas and rats, which is probably why the 1990 action figure by Playmates had rats on his belt. Eventually, the other turtles reunited with Raphael and Zog. Utilizing Zog's intimidating presence, they followed him to locations he knew were Foot strongholds. After overcoming some ninjas, Donatello accessed a supercomputer in one of the main Foot control centers. He discovered various outposts and a main operations complex disguised within a city block. He triggered alarms at different outposts to distract the ninjas, clearing their way into the main building. After several fights, the clan was finally aware of their presence there, and things started getting harder and harder for the Turtles and Zog. Fight after fight, they made progress, but everything stopped after Zog was killed by 3 deformed Shredder clones. Defeating these beings soon proved to be nearly impossible. After slicing off one of the Shredder clones' arms, Leonardo discovered they were composed of worms. Raphael felt he wasn't needed there. He left his brothers behind to face the Shredder alone. Knowing it would be a real challenge for him alone, Leonardo went after him and saved him from being killed by the Shredder's elite guard. I know NECA called these Foot Enforcers, but they were really elites. Leonardo defeated the elites and sent an injured Raphael back to assist his brothers against the clones. Donnie and Mikey used fire to take down the clones, and then Raph joined them to combat more Foot soldiers. On the top floor, Leonardo finally confronted Saki, who revealed the secret of his resurrection. The Foot scientists had discovered that worms could assimilate the memories of the beings they consumed. Once fed, the worms would cluster to mimic the original form of the food. Over time, these worms would permanently merge, sharing flesh and nerves, creating a makeshift human form without a central brain or internal organs, rendering them extraordinarily tough to kill. The 3 Shredder clones were the results of these experiments. After their success, they fed Saki's remains to the worms, turning him into nothing more than a colony of worms. Leo and the Shredder engaged in a sword fight that ended with a victorious Leo and a decapitated Shredder. The rest of the Turtles did enough damage to blow up most of the complex, and by the end, they regrouped and burned the Shredder's remains, hoping to eliminate him for good. Burning the worms should have worked, but things didn't go as planned. We're past the events of Return to New York now, but a shark would eat the Shredder's head. With some supernatural intervention, this shark transformed into the Shark Shredder, a new nemesis for the Turtles and Splinter. Check out my original Shredder video to discover more about the Shark Shredder. I know what you're thinking. This whole worm colony concept is bonkers, right? Well, if you've been reading comic books for a while, your suspension of disbelief has probably been trained to accept such oddities as somewhat normal. However, you probably remember that I mentioned Peter came up with this idea after reading an article. So what's the science behind all this craziness? The article Peter read was most likely about an actual research done about memory transfer in planarian worms, done by James V. McConnell. This groundbreaking experiment took place in the 1960s. McConnell conditioned flatworms to respond to stimuli, then cut them into pieces and fed them to their cannibalistic counterparts. He then tested whether the memories had been transferred to the worms that ate them. This experiment has never been able to be replicated, or at least not with worms. However, planarian worms were the subject of this investigation because they tended to retain their memories when split in two, indicating that their memories weren't in a central place. This research not only influenced the Shredder's resurrection in TMNT, but also inspired Alan Moore's acclaimed Anatomy Lesson story. In it, it's revealed that Alec Holland didn't transform into the Swamp Thing. Rather, his essence was assimilated by another organism that believed it was him. McConnell was no stranger to the limelight, making several TV appearances which helped popularize the memory transfer theory enough to inspire these comic book stories. The worm colony story would have also inspired the 3rd installment of the Turtles movie franchise. Peter suggested hinting at the Shredder's return in Secret of the Ooze, and proposed making the 3rd movie an adaptation of Return to New York. However, that idea was ultimately not realized. Return to New York became integral to the franchise and was later adapted into several other versions. This trilogy succeeded in putting the Turtles back in the city. However, because the writers were still uncomfortable writing stories in New York, the characters would return to the Jones farmhouse throughout the years. From a metatextual point of view, one can't help but compare it with the real world. The turtles had to fight together to re-establish order in their life, just like Kevin and Peter having had to do one more collaboration to bring their story back to the status quo for the comic to survive the Turtlemania years. The duo wouldn't collaborate on another story together until the 50th issue, for the City at War saga that I already covered on this channel. What are your thoughts on the story? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, see you in the sewers.